real conversations, and some hard truths. Gangs, drugs, and guns. Giving a voice to those willing to sacrifice. We have stories that need to be told. We have lessons that need to be taught. Protect and serve. Welcome to The Quiet Professional. Right, welcome back, everyone. Nathan Romas with you again. Today, we're going to be talking a little bit about finances. So as we come up to the holidays, hopefully everybody hasn't given away their money. Also with the new year approaching, maybe now's the time to kind of get some things in order. So we'll talk a little bit about working on finances and money management and yourself. And to help with this, I have the co-founder of Enriched Academy, Kevin Cochran, on the show. For over the past 15 years, Kevin has been speaking to people about money management for families, teens, and young adults. And he's been featured on radio and television, including CBC's Dragon's Den. Kevin has talked with over 100,000 people, from professionals to students, schools, and corporations, about topics such as financial literacy and personal wealth. And he's spoken to the Canadian Police Association, Ontario Police Association, CFL Grey Cup Alumni Conference, and the Canadian Pension and Benefits Institute. And I know he's kind of been around the Edmonton Police as well. And his current business, Enriched Academy, seeks to help people avoid learning financial lessons the hard way. So welcome, Kevin.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate it. Nice meeting you.
Great to have you on. And I don't think there's a more timely topic, especially with inflation going up. People are spending around the holidays. And just as we were saying before we fired this up, there's quite a few people who probably own a few homes around and got all the rental properties going. So, we're going to get into how do you kind of manage some of this stuff. But before we do that, let's talk a little bit about you. So you can kind of tell us about yourself and where you come from and how you got into all this.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I'm 45 years old. I live in a town just northeast of Toronto called Uxbridge, Ontario. It's a smaller town. Always joke around, not much to do here because our pub crawl started at Swish LA, right? There's really nothing to do in Uxbridge. But I did grow up in Toronto as a high school student, wasn't necessarily the brightest student. My marks weren't good enough to, even justify being able to get accepted into a post-secondary school. So I went right into the workforce out of high school and, worked full-time, odd-end jobs, like an assistant manager of Burger King, mechanic, little things like that. But at the end of the day, after 2 years of finishing high school, I was over $20,000 in credit card debt, bought my first car on a credit card. My credit got so bad that someone stole my identity and my credit rating got better, right? Like how bad my credit rating was. And the challenge is that, I was living at home for free with my mom and I still ended up spending all the money I earned plus $20,000 more on a credit card, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's my story. And you have a lot of students that do go to post-secondary school. When they graduate, they owe $30,000 of the student loan debt and they can't get a job right away. So what do? They go back to the bank, mom and dad, Mom, Dad, I can't get a job. I got to start paying the student loan off. What am I going to do? And guess what most parents say? Come live at home with me for a while. And you start realizing there's a study done by Royal Bank of Canada back in 2019. This is pre-COVID. They found out that nearly 50% of parents, half of parents, still financially subsidize their kids well into their 30s.
Wow.
Right. So you can see this. Yeah, it's nuts. They're paying for the cell phones, groceries, whatever it may be. Right. And you can see there's student loans and you can see there's this massive catastrophic failure in educating students about money. Right? Our parents don't teach us about money. Poverty gets passed on because our parents don't teach us, right? Schools didn't teach us traditionally, but you have governments being very proactive, such as yours, provincially. They're attacking financial literacy with vengeance, which I commend them for doing that because they've done an amazing job. But a lot of other provinces across the country haven't done that yet.
Mm.
And honestly, the banking system, a lot of bank systems don't necessarily, want us to understand how the money works, right? And so it's a perfect storm of a disaster when it comes to this. And that's why we wanted to tackle financial literacy.
So when you're saying that you accumulated all this debt, what were you kind of thinking around that time? Like, so you're saying things were kind of hard. You're working from job to job, but is it just nobody ever talked to you at all about finances and you just kind of, the bank's just handing you money, nobody's telling you anything?
Yeah, no, you don't really understand the math behind it, right? And so you just, it's you're walking through a mall and there's a credit card booth there, and they're giving out free T-shirts, and they got a wheel of prizes, and you get a credit card, and then next thing you know, you get a credit card with $1,000 limit, but that seems like free money to you, and you go and party with that, and then you got to realize you got to pay the piper when it comes to that. And if you look at it, I got a credit card statement here. It's one of my older ones, but it's like 17. Yeah, let me use this one right here. The $12,000 credit card balance, right? The business card right here.
Wow.
How long do you think it would take to pay off to make this with this Royal Bank credit card? And doesn't matter what bank it is. Math is math, right? 19% interest. I'm going to ask you, how long do you think it would take to pay off the $12,000 credit card at Royal Bank, making payments at 19%? What would you guess?
10 years.
Right. Okay. Well, I'm going to read it to you. It says on the back page of your credit card statement, it would take you 104 years and 10 months to pay it off.
Oh, wow.
Right?
Actually,
104 years. It actually says it right there. See, I know we're on Zoom, so you can see that.
Yeah.
So it's right there. And you look at it and you go, this is where, and so you ask me how I felt. I felt anxiety. I felt, and the number one stress Canadians have right now is money, according to a recent federal study. And the reason why I think a lot of the things, Canadians worry more about money than they do their own personal health. And that leads, and that anxiety and stress leads to heart disease, sleepless nights, depression, anxiety, alcohol. It actually amplifies other issues. And I think that's how I felt at the time. I felt all these, stress, because I'm like, I don't know how to get out of it. Because you make the minimum payment, you're doing everything they ask you to do. And I remember we had a doctor come to one of our events. Think about this. We think, the older we get, the smarter we are, we know more about money. I'm telling you right now, that is not, money is like a language. And unless somebody sits you down and teaches you it, you're never going to pick it up. I don't care how smart you are and how many years you go to school. We had a doctor come to one of our live events, had $10,000 worth of credit card debt, stressing out, saying, Kev, I've been making minimum payments for years. I don't know what I'm going to do. I can't seem to get ahead. And I told him, it's going to take over 100 years paid off, and he didn't know.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so that's what I mean. If somebody doesn't sit us down and teach us how to use this language, we're going to get eaten up.
Well, and thinking back to when I used to work at TD Bank years and years ago, and I remember people would come in and just like simple overdraft protection on an account. They actually saw that as money, like their money. I was like, no, this is the bank thinks like you're trustworthy enough based on your history with the bank and money you have in accounts that they're willing to give you this. But they actually thought that was the bank saying like, oh, here's a free $1,000 or whatever your overdraft might be. And same with credit cards. People spend it like it's owed to them. It's like, no, that's debt. You're going to owe somebody.
Yeah. Well, I 100% agree with you. I want to be clear about this. I'm very pro credit card. I buy everything on credit cards, just as long as you pay it off on time and in full every month, and there's nothing wrong with them, right? I watched this whole video recently about it, talking about like if I had a choice to pay something via my debit or credit, I always do my credit card, because if you go buy something on your debit, that cash is gone, right? And if let's say if you buy something online and it's not what you thought it was, or don't ever get it delivered, or something happens, it's very tough to recoup that money. But credit cards, it's a much, much better process. They can cancel the payment, they cancel the merchant, their ability to charge on Visa. So Visa is a much, much better option, as long as you pay it off in full and on time every month. That's all.
Yeah. Well, so you accumulated all this debt, and you said you had no real formal education, and you're working job to job. So how do you kind of work through getting out of that debt?
Yeah, well, you just work your butt off. I was fortunate enough to meet a mentor that really kind of changed my life, put me in the right direction, and that was a really big change in my life. I literally found him by picking up the phone book. I thought I was going to become a real estate agent because I didn't have any post-secondary education, and you can get a real estate license in a few months at the time. And so I started calling real estate agents, offering to work for free for any of them. And I called over 60 of them, and the only guy that called me back was this guy by the name of Richard Robbins, and he was one of the top RE/MAX agents in North America. And he kind of brought me under his wing with this big company, and I ended up doing fairly well with that, which was great. But again, here's the interesting part about it is that after I paid off that debt, I worked my butt off, paid off that debt, and then I saved $150,000. And interesting enough, then I asked a mentor of mine, I said, I got to get this money invested. I got to find a good financial advisor. And they gave me theirs. And again, not knowing that my mentor, though he did well, he didn't understand money as well as I thought he did. And I gave that $150,000 to an advisor. They had it for 6 years, and when I cashed out, I ended up with $142,000 because I didn't understand how mutual fund fees work, right? And deferred sales charges, low load and front end loaded. So that's the problem. Like, this is what I mean. Like, people think financial literacy and people that go to our program are people that are broke or in debt, which is not the case. Tons of people come to our program. And I remember we had one lady come to our program. She had over $1 million with her financial advisor, and I asked her how much she paid him. She didn't know.
Yeah.
And so financial literacy, we don't understand our mutual fund fees here in Canada. And you got to realize, like, our mutual fund fees gobble up to nearly 40% if you're not careful.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying that's a blanket. I don't want to make that a blanket statement, but I meet many, many people that they don't understand. Remember, if you have a mutual fund, there's 4 people that want to get paid. You want to get paid. The person that sold you the mutual fund wants to get paid. You work for brokerage that wants to get paid, and the mutual fund wants to get paid. That's 4 hands in your pocket. And I'll tell you, I remember there was one police officer we worked with. His staff sergeant had retired. He inherited $200,000. Somebody had passed away in the family, and he was 35 years old. And after watching our program, he goes, "Am I looking at my fees on my mutual funds?" He goes, "I want to make sure I'm okay." I said, "Sure, no problem." He goes, because he trusted the staff sergeant, because he's an old friend of his. So he's not malicious.
Mm-hmm.
And after going through it, I said, "Oh yeah, your MERs are pretty high. They're sitting at 3%. He goes, "Well, that's not bad. If I'm getting 3%, if he's getting 3%, then I'm getting 97%. I said, "That's not the way the math works." I said, "What's 3% of $200,000?
Mm-hmm.
And I said, "That's $6,000 a year in fees. You're paying $500 a month." And I said, based on your trajectory, by the time you're 65 at a 3% MER, that 200,000 will grow to 1.1 million. He goes, "Yeah, that's not bad." I said, "Yeah." I said, "But you know what? Go through our program, our financial advisor interrogation kit. That's the one thing I think why Edmonton Police and so many groups love us. We don't refer financial advisors. We don't manage money. We don't have a horse in the race. We don't have a we don't have a horse in this race, right?"
Mm-hmm.
And so, after going through our program, he knew how to find the right advisor, and he got his MERs down to 1.2. And so, over the same trajectory, that 200,000 over 30 years instead of a $1.1 million return at 1.9. So, put $897,000 back in his pocket over 30 years. And I sat there and I said, "How much overtime would you have to work to make that?"
Yeah.
And he said, "Well, like, you gave me a decade of my life back." And I said, and that's what Enriched Academy does. That's why we've had so much success working with police officers, and whether it's athletes, police officers, chiropractor, it doesn't really matter what. We don't learn about money no matter what career path we take. And that's why, you do have groups like the Edmonton Police taking massive strides to clean up the mess when it comes to what we didn't learn prior in our life.
Well, and I've seen even people who come into the bank back when I was there, and it doesn't really matter what background you come from. We had people in there, like you're saying, doctors. They'll come in with just boatloads of debt, and they don't know how to spend money. And then you have people who have just the day-to-day job working fast food joint, and they're in the same boat. So,
well, can I tell you something? This is what I love about money the most. You want to know the most exciting thing about it is that, we used to run events where we had thousands. Like in 2019, pre-COVID, we had over 2,000 Canadians show up for our live events, and
wow.
We had plumbers, logs, doctors, lawyers, you name it. And what I found amazing is that we would have a electrician making $75,000 to $80,000 a year sitting in the room. And in the same room, we have a lawyer making $250,000. And more times than not, that plumber electrician had them making $80,000 a year had a higher net worth than a lawyer making $250,000.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they don't look wealthier, right? They drive a beat-up old car, but it's paid off, right?
Yeah.
They live in a smaller home, but own 3 of them because 2 of them are investment properties. And what we tend to do is we judge people based on their possessions, and I call it stealth wealth. And the wealthiest Canadians I met do not look like the wealthiest Canadians. Yep. I can assure you that. But that's the way we're brought up, and I think people are hardwired thinking. You see somebody driving in a nice car, but you don't know if it's a lease, right? And I'm not saying leases are bad necessarily, but as I said, it's interesting, right? And that's where I think a lot of people fail right out, or have this understanding of money, is because we think it's based on possessions.
So kind of tell me, how did you get this idea for Enriched Academy, and how did this develop?
Well, it's the weirdest story in the world, actually. I back to that Richard Robbins conversation where I wanted to become a real estate agent. We ended up growing a sales training company, and I was a speaker. And I thought, hey, I'm going to go out and become a speaker. And so I thought, why not go to school and teach about money, talk about my experience in my early 20s, with no intention of growing a company. And I had a friend, and now my business partner, Jay Seabrook, was on the same page, and he worked at the company. And we started speaking at high schools, and it was a disaster to start off with. Kids were falling asleep during the presentation, because money is such a dry subject, right? and stuff to hit a nerve, and it's just boring. Even the word financial literacy is boring, right? And so it just is. And so what Jay and I were fairly persistent and just more or less just aggressive and just want to learn. So over a decade, we did over 250 events at high schools. We got to a point where parents were calling us up at night because we started dialing in the presentation. I remember we had one dad call me up one time saying, "I don't know what you did, but you're the guy that spoke at my daughter's school today. She's going to university next year. But next year when she goes to university, she's saving to buy a car. But instead of that, now she wants to buy an investment property instead, set a cosign for the mortgage." Like, we created dialogue in 45 minutes with students that didn't have that before. And I think that's kind of the secret sauce to Enriched Academy, is that we probably think we put more people to sleep than anybody else. Right. Yeah. And that's why we're really good. If you want to be really good, you got to be really bad. And I think that's really what makes Enriched Academy so special. And that's why I think it really resonates with our audience, because we poke fun at the audience, make fun of them, we make fun of us. Right. And one of my favorite comments we get back from our audience is like, "You guys don't even seem that bright." And we're not. Like, we're not trying to hide. We're not trying to say we're here and you're down there. We're just saying, hey, let's take this complicated language that traditionally is hidden from us. Let's simplify it in a way that anybody can understand, and let's take away all these perceptions that the more money you make, the more money you have. You know how many police officers I've worked with that say, the more hours I work, the less money I have. Mm-hmm. More and more overtime I work more and more overtime, the less money I have. Because it's not a money-making issue that's the problem. It's a spending issue. There's something wrong. And this is the analogy I always give. Imagine you go to the gym, right? That's how I go to the gym. I imagine it. Yeah. You don't have to wake up in the morning. But here's what I think is that imagine you go to the gym and I ask you to lift 90 pounds and you can't lift 90 pounds. Right? You can't lift 90 pounds because you lift 110 pounds. Mm-hmm. And you can't, right? You're like, of course I can't lift heavier weight. Well, it's the same thing when it comes to money. If you can't manage 90,000, right? If you work $20,000 worth of overtime to 110, you can't lift 100. You can't manage 110, mm-hmm. Right? You can't. I know you can't. Like, it just, you sure if you can't manage 90 pounds, you can't lift 90 pounds, you can't lift 110 pounds. You definitively know that. Yeah. Right. But for some reason we have this perception: if you can't manage 90,000, you can manage 110. You can't. You have two more ATVs on or snowmobiles in your property, mm-hmm. Right? And I guaranteed, or a nicer car, right? And that's what happens. Those are the mistakes that we make. So if you think that working overtime is going to get you, I'm not saying don't work overtime. Let's be clear about that. But most of the time, it's like real estate agents. They'll sell 5 more homes next year, right? You know what I mean? That'll get me out of my debt. But, they just end up. Anybody who worked as hard as I have last year deserves a little bit more. Yeah. Right. So.
Well, and prioritizing what you buy, right? So do you really need this thing as opposed to maybe paying off some debt or putting it in an investment that's making more than what you're spending in the market on interest, say?
Yeah, no, listen, I think traditionally people over car and over house. I think that's the big, I've met a lot of Canadians and I, if they're in debt or if they are not owning an investment property, it's rarely because they buy a $5 cup of coffee every day, right? Mm-hmm. That's not what buries them. Is that, I joke around when I walk into a room full of police officers. I go, okay, I just saw a brand new Camaro or a brand new pickup truck. Who's the rookie that got their first paycheck? Right? Yeah, and you know what I mean? So they all start laughing, but it's true. And then I try to explain to the audience, because I read this in a book one time, is that you're actually allowed to keep a car more than 4 years. Right? I don't know if people know that or not, but we think we legally have to change a car every 3 to 5 years. And I've met a lot of wealthy first responders, whether they're, firefighters, police officers. And I'm telling you, what I've realized? Wealthy police officers and firefighters love to show off their shitty cars. Mm-hmm. Right? They're like, I remember I was in Atlantic, Canada, and one of the police officer there during breaking out, he came out, he kept, I'm worth millions. Look at my car. And he showed me his phone. This is a piece of shit. Lincoln. It's a 2001. And that's what I always laugh at that, right? And it never fails during any break with first responders. There's always a couple wealthy ones in there, and they always have a shitty car, and they love bragging about it.
So, where have you kind of been with the Academy? Do you mostly speak to Canadians, or have you gone all over the world?
No, we really found a niche here in Canada. Like, it was always tempting to go to other countries, like Australia or United States, but we are Canadian. There's so much work to do here in Canada. Mm-hmm. Like, there really is, right? We're just starting. I've been fortunate enough to build a couple businesses and with very good business partners, and so it's not just me, to be clear. And which has been amazing. And this business was a little different because there was no template to follow when it comes to, listen, there's something like this out in the market and we'll just kind of tweak it up and make it our own. When it comes to financial literacy, whether you're approaching a school board, a government, this is very new. Everybody talks about it, but there really is no company out there that does what we do in Canada. And there are some that are sponsored by banks, which I'm not a really big believer in.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not against banks. I want to be clear about that. I can say it over and over again. But, I know that there are some financial literacy companies out there that are backed by, big financial institutions that charge massive fees on their mutual funds. And, you're kind of letting the fox in the hen house. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And we have no sponsors, not one, zero, right? This is completely self-funded. And so we've taken the last 6-7 years really trying to understand this business model, throwing millions and millions and millions of dollars into this thing, believe you me. What it needs to be with our videos and the way our curriculum is built out and the quality of people to execute on this. So again, that's why I think Canada's where we're here to stay for at least the next 3 to 5 years before we're looking around.
Well, and you brought it up a few times, talking in schools. I would think that's probably one of the most important places to start. But what kind of capacity are you talking to students in, and at what grades? Because I'm also wondering, what's an appropriate age to start talking to kids about finances? Like, you can explain money and things at a very early age, but when you actually start talking about how to handle money, how to save, how to spend, like where do you start that?
Yeah, so traditionally just so you know, the one thing going out and speaking to high schools, which we had done in the past, right? That was kind of the beginning of what Enriched Academy was. The problem is that's a great place to, fine tune your content, but it's not a great place to make a difference because you go in, speak to a bunch of kids, and then it's like taking a shower, it kind of wears off, right? The kids go back home, tell their parents about it. They're like, oh yeah, saving money. Kind of like watching the movie Titanic. You go back and tell somebody, yeah, I get it, the ship sank, right? And what we've done differently, and this is where the millions have been invested in, is that we've created like those live events I was telling you about. We actually filmed one of our live events, cut it up, we edited it, added 30 different interviews, whether the financial advisors, the dragons are in it, past prime ministers are in the program, authors of books, you name it. So we built this a 12-segment video-based learning portal that the student gets forever. And just like the one thing about money, and this is why I'm really happy to see, when you work with school boards such as your own and governments such as your own, there in Alberta, is that they kind of, because traditionally, again, a lot of governments thought we'll just write this ourselves. And I've seen, and it just doesn't work. And I'll tell you why it doesn't work is because that money just changes too much. Like, think about if you were to talk about cryptocurrency today versus last year. Like, everything is dropped by 2/3, right? Think about inflation. It really wasn't a thing people talked about a year ago, right? Now it's everything. So money changes direction so quickly that you can't, like, when you have a certain group trying to create this curriculum, it just becomes dated so quickly. And so they're kind of stepped aside and said, listen, we're going to let the professionals manage this. But at the same time, what we try to do at Enriched Academy is we take feedback back from and provincial government saying, okay, well, what can we do? Here's the core of this thing. What would you do to just adjust it? And we're constantly making adjustments based on the feedback, but they kind of allow us to do what we need to do, which is great. And that's why we create great partnerships. So traditionally we're a high school based program, but now we've evolved to a lot more. So that was grade 9 to grade 10 to 12. We just created a program for grade 7 to grade 9, and we're basing one now for grade 4 to grade 6.
Oh, wow.
Just the reason why we're doing that is that the feedback from the students has been amazing. The average student grades our program at 9.1 out of 10, which is great. Which shows you that we're kind of they graded an A. Let's just say they graded an A.
Yeah.
And so we know we're hitting a nerve. And so the grade 7 to grade 9 program is a little different. We're not talking about credit cards really at grade 7 because it's not a thing for them right now. Like, they're not getting a credit card for another 7-8 years. But what we're talking about is social media influencers, how they get paid, how product work, right? They don't really understand that they're really being advertised to constantly, right? And unknowingly that, right? We talk about how you can buy and sell stock at an early age, because you can. That's a thing that most parents don't understand, right? Is that if you have a kid under 18, you can still buy and sell stock in their name through an interest account. And we talk about how to, if you have a job, whether it's mowing the lawn, whatever it may be, take a portion of that money and start buying stock. Right? It's one of the best things you can. Warren Buffett bought my first stock at age 11. I was wasting my life up until then, right? And you know what? That's with parents. It's so interesting because and I'm kind of all over the place here, but I don't want to lose this train of thought on this. Is that we really try to change the money narrative, right? I have a lot of parents call me up every month saying, "I'm freaking out, man. You know what? My kids are never going to be able to afford a home. It's more expensive than ever before. This is the worst time to be a kid." I go, "Well, what are you talking about? This is the best time ever in the history of time to build wealth as a kid." Mm-hmm. I remember when I was in high school back in 1995, if I wanted to buy stock, you had to call somebody or go somewhere. You had to look at a newspaper stock prices, which was a day old information. Now, from a click of a button, right? From a click of a button, you can buy and sell stock from your phone.
Yeah.
Right. Even under the age of 18, as long as a parent or guardian is there to help you do it. Right. You can actually do that. This is the best time in the history of time, people. There's more mortgage products out there that exist than ever before. You can buy your first investment property at 19 years old with 5% down as long as you live. There's so many different products out there. But the problem is parents have, well, what did I do in 1995? Right. I'm using an example. What did my parents do? We're like trying to teach a kid how to use a VCR or CD player. We're so dated that we're actually almost like malpractice when most parents teach their kids about money, right? Because it's dated. It's not up to date. And we have to relook at everything. There's more options and opportunities for students now than ever before. But if we teach our kids what we did or what our grandparents did, you're not, then they're going to have a hard road.
Well, and you kind of were mentioning there, you had some of the Dragon's Den people involved. Was that part of the process for when you were getting started, or did you go through that show later on? Is just you're already kind of up and running?
Yeah, we were up and running. We had a product. We had proof of sales, which was great. We went up and, we had a really big day there. I remember there was, we had all 5 Dragons on the company, and we ended up working with 2 of them, Jim Treliving and Proxima. I know we're one of the better deals ever done on the show, which is pretty exciting. And again, but that show, you got to know what you're getting into, right? They're not going to pick up the phones and prospect for you, and I knew they weren't, right? Number one, you get some credibility being on television, which is great. But at the end of the day, it's up to us to pick up the phones and grind them every day, which is what we did. That's our secret weapon, is our ability to generate business and go out there and deliver on the promises that we say that we're going to give to our customers, right? And just like your provincial government, right? We've been working with them for years now, and the first year was a pilot to see if this thing was real. See if we deliver on what we would, and we did in spades. That's why, we continually build a good partnership with your province, which led to, working with the Edmonton Police is a perfect example, right? Yeah. Which led to working with all different, this is just a small sample sizing of the people that we work with. And as I said, but there you go.
So how busy are you guys? Is it, do you got multiple people going out and doing conferences every day essentially, or is it just a couple of you?
Yeah, so we've got a fairly large organization here. We're sitting around 35 people, which is great. I know that it's huge, but it's good. So we have content developers, video editing. We're always testing new material, writing new content. You got to have a phenomenal technology, because again, we really depend on our technology as well. We've got hundreds of thousands of people going through our online portal every single year, right? Through schools or governments or corporations or whatever it may be. So we're always busy, but we hire accordingly, and it's been great. So yeah.
So if we kind of focus a little bit on the people that you might be helping out there, would there be a common theme or maybe common traits among people when you see them mismanaging money?
Yeah, it's really we're not trying, and I think this is why people love our content so much. And I think the way we deliver it is we really kind of just take the pressure off. The secret to life to me again is just don't overspend, right? It really is. It's not, keep your overhead as low as you possibly can, right? But I really truly believe people over house and over car. I think those are the 2 biggest things that they do. And it's times like this to just prove especially the last couple of years when everybody was buying everything, right? You can't buy a snowmobile, can't buy an ATV, can't buy a Sea-Doo, like years behind on, and because everybody's buying one, you're like, man, I want to buy that too, right?
Yeah.
And I get that urge, but success leaves clues, right? You look at Warren Buffett, one of the wealthiest people in the world, lives in the same house that he bought in 1957 for $36,000. And like, think about that. You look at some of the like Mark, like I can go on a lot of examples of that. But I'll just stick with that one. But as I said, I think a lot of the damage that we do financially is self-inflicted. It really, really is, right? And so we need to, sometimes step back and realize what really brings us happiness, right? Because if buying stuff brings you happiness, then it's you're gonna have a hard run at it, right? You got to find really what brings you happiness, right?
Or is it temporary happiness, right? It's not really something that's going to benefit you in the long run. You got to look at why you're buying it or what the purpose is, I guess.
Oh yeah, 100%, right? Like I've been fortunate enough to do a little bit better as I've gotten older, and the more money I have, the more I realize I got 3 kids myself. My happiness with my kids doesn't come usually from the biggest Christmas gift, right? It's the weirdest thing in the world. It's like taking and I say this to the audiences. It's like taking an afternoon off, and take my kid out of school and going to see a movie for $20, right? And just having that time with them, that $20 will go further than any technology you can buy them for an iPad for $500 to $1,000 or whatever it may be. But we keep fooling ourselves thinking that the more gifts under that tree or the more stuff that we buy or whatever it may be, and sometimes it's just simple experiences that have the biggest impact, right?
Yeah,
that don't cost a lot of money.
Yeah. Well, and what's the biggest way that people help themselves? Do they need somebody to manage the money for them, do you find? Or are people kind of, once they talk to you, are they able to do things for themselves?
So it'd be like I wouldn't know what the actual stat would be, but the cool thing is, like, people, after they go through our program, they understand the place that what part we play in their money. We don't manage the money, right? But we need a lot of people that, just like that police officer I was telling you about, whose staff sergeant retired, and he was being charged a huge MER. We're kind of like the middleman, right? And so what I mean by that is that some people watch our program and say, I could do this for myself. And we're like, great. We don't advise you whether you should or shouldn't. But if you're going to go down the path of finding a financial advisor, or a robo-advisor for that fact, by the time you're done our program, you're at least going to be able to sit down at a table like you and I are sitting here, online. You're going to be able to have a dialogue where you're going to understand what they're saying, right? And saying, hey, listen, do you charge deferred sale charge or redemption fees or low loads or front end or back end load? You don't understand what that means. So those are really important words when it comes to your investing, right? What is an MER, right? What is management? That's just a really complicated word to say. Charge the whole commission. Who gets paid what? And understand that, right? Because if your MERs are anything over 1.1 and 1.2, you're probably not going to win. Right? Your fees are just getting up too much of your returns, right?
Can you tell us some of the craziest situations you've seen or heard of?
Oh, there's been tons, right? And I think right off the bat, which I will, but first of all, if you're listening right now and you're in debt, one thing I always want to say is that you're not alone. Half of Canadians live there, right? And and I think that's the first thing we do at Enriched Academy is say, listen, if you're in your 20s and 30s and you're in debt, kind of understand that a little bit. You're trying to kickstart your life, pay off any student loan debt you may have. We're trying to, buy your first home, buy a car, start a family, whatever it may be, right? But if you're in your 40s and 50s and you are, you're in your 40s or 50s and still paycheck to paycheck or in debt, you definitely need a course correction, right? It's not too late, just like many people think, but you definitely need a course correction. But some of the crazy stories, right? We've worked with a lot of athletes, make billions of dollars, and they have nothing to show for it, nothing. I mean, shocked, right? My gosh, they spent over 10 million. They got nothing to show for it, right? Because athletes like NHL players, they don't understand how their paychecks work, right? I worked with one, the OHL, the Ontario Hockey League. We worked with some of their teams, and one of the players I met got signed by an NHL team, and he goes, I got my first paycheck, got my signing bonus, right? $90,000. It's great. He said in front of his whole team, very proud. I go, were you taxed on that? He didn't know, right? And an NHL player that makes $1 million a year, half its tax, right? That's gone. You're never going to see that again. And then down to $500,000, and they got to pay escrow at 13%, which is really paying the owners back that don't make any money. That's $130,000 out of that paycheck, right? then they got to pay their agency to 5%. So for every million they make, they only take home about 350 to 400,000, which seems great, but the problem is a short career and it's a long life. So a lot of crazy athlete stories when it comes to money. When it comes to MERs, I was telling you an MER3. Then one lady had a program, an MER of 9,
Yeah.
right? And the return since inception of that particular fund was negative 3%. So we've seen some really crazy stuff like that where MERs are just out of control. We've seen, I've worked with some real estate professionals, some of the best in the country. They made millions and millions and millions of dollars, and they don't work next month. They can't pay their bills, right? So there's really, there's just endless stories and stuff like that. And as I said, most of that stuff is just self-inflicted based on buying stuff every month that they don't really need to impress people they don't really like, right? Just to keep this facade going. And people go, what kind of car I drive? I drive a 2010 Ford F-150 pickup, right? I got 200,000 kilometers, and people say, why don't buy a new car? Because I can. I've done fairly well in my life. And I go, I got 3 kids. My car smells like vomit and goldfish crackers. I don't need any more. I don't need something else to smell like vomit and goldfish crackers.
Yeah.
So, and that's what I mean. So as I said, it's, so that there are lots of crazy stories, but it really, like that doctor with $10,000 with a credit card debt, making minimum payments for 3 years. That's a pretty crazy story for me, right?
I think a lot of people like to know that, like you said, they're not the only ones in this situation, or people do have to realize that there's usually somebody who has it worse, unless you're doing some crazy thing. But one thing I was going to ask about, and you kind of touched on it, was athletes. And I think it was the NFL. Usually when people get drafted, they have like I'll call it a financial literacy course, or how to manage money before they start. So that's just also because they have a lot of people come out of the woodwork and start saying, like, give me money. Hey, I'm that cousin you forgot about. Hey, could I have $1 million? But maybe with some of these places like police, where you're in an academy setting, you're in a school setting for a few months, maybe that's part of the training or something. Because here you can make quite a bit of money. I mean, your base salary is going to be 6 figures, but with overtime, like, what are you going to do with all that overtime? And are you making better decisions? So maybe kind of getting to people a bit earlier in their careers, especially guys getting on the force now. The guys and girls are like, 19, 20, and then all of a sudden you're getting 6 figures. So it's definitely something to consider.
Yeah, so 100% on the same page. And that kind of goes back to an earlier thing you said, like you go into the United States or Australia or whatever it may be, other countries, is that there's so much work to do here in Canada. The logical answer, that's a very logical thing you said there, right? But it's just beyond making a phone call and just getting it in. It's as much as I love it was that easy. I was part of a business prior to this. We sold for over $120 million, right? There's 4 of us, right? So it's a really big day in anybody's life when you sell a business for $120 million.
Mm-hmm. That
was really hard to do.
Yeah.
This is way harder, right? Like, it's way, way harder. Because you just have to go through layers of bureaucracy and it's a big rabbit hole I take you down. As much as it's like, hey, listen, you know what? Look at the response we've had. Look at the feedback we had. Look at the groups that we work with. You would think a phone call and adding an 8-hour course to justify the thousands of hours they're going to do in training. You think it would be that easy. It just isn't. There's just a whole process to get there. And we think our goal is to get there. With your neighboring province in BC, we're very close to that happening, if not already happening now, where they would do cadet training. And I believe that we should be doing that with your province as well. I agree. But it's not there, but it will slowly get there. I wish it worked faster. Traditionally, I've worked with entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs kind of, shoot the puck. And as I said, I understand you can't necessarily treat everything like that. Sometimes it doesn't work. But as I said, we'll get there eventually. And I think that's why a lot of people don't succeed in the space that we're in. There has to be a certain level of stick-to-itiveness. And people just don't have that, right? I think I've never seen an industry where it's so underestimated how much work goes into it. Like, we have a really, really, as I said, very highly qualified team here that does what it needs to do. And I sometimes see somebody saying, hey, I'm starting a financial literacy company. I commend them doing that. I'm not trying to, that's kind of what we were at the beginning, but I don't think they really truly appreciate that whole battle. that they're going to face, right? When it comes to negotiating agreements, delivering on those agreements. It's like even with your province, right? After your province committed to working with us, that wasn't like, not like it's over. 13,000 emails, 450 phone calls to superintendents, school boards, launches, you name it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just way beyond what one person can do. But if you want to execute and have the program graded an A and have actual usage out of it, that's what it takes. And so, as I said, that's what it's going to take to penetrate and work with your group as well, which we will. Right?
So kind of getting to current events, where are we kind of right now? And would you have some advice for people based on, high inflation that we're in and where things might be going?
Yeah, listen, I'm not a doom and gloom guy, but as I said, I really think that we're going to have a challenging year next year. I think if you think otherwise, you're fooling yourself, right? And I look at I own a bunch of investment properties, and I had a couple of them on a variable rate mortgage, and recently the variable rate mortgages hit their trigger rates, right? And on a $500,000 mortgage, I'm going to ask you, how much do you think my mortgage payment went up a month on that one property?
Oh, geez, I don't know.
What would you guess per month? What would you guess on a $500,000 mortgage? It's a variable trigger rate. How much more a month my payment increase?
Double.
Yeah. So what would you think? It went up $1,000 a month.
Oh, okay.
Right, and that's just on one. And so that's $12,000 after tax,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then my other property, luckily most of them were on fixed rate. These two were on variables, and the other one at $400,000 mortgage went up $700 a month. And so that's $1,700 a month. That's what they're trying to do. They're trying to take that disposable income of $1,700 out of the market so that people stop buying stuff, right? Yeah. And luckily, these are investment properties, right? And so that just kind of eats into your cash flow a little bit, right? But saying that is that a lot of people bought those homes, which is their primary residence, on a variable that just hit the trigger. That's $12,000, and a $500,000 mortgage is not an unreasonable amount of money, right? That's $700,000 home, not too expensive, not too crazy, right? That's, if you look at that, that's a lot of people just got that notice of $1,000 a month going out, and that's after tax. Remember, so to make $12,000 a year, that's $1,000 a month. You got to make $18,000 or $20,000. And think about how many of this is that how many people have a mortgage coming up for renewal in the next 3 to 6 months, right? Yeah. And believe you me, they are worried, and as they should be, right? Because it's going to go up in price. Their mortgage payments are going to go up. So as I said, the two best ways to attack this is, number one, keep your overhead as low as possible. Right. And number two is you always have your money working, right? If your money's sitting in a bank account with inflation at 6, 7, 8%, whatever it's at right now, right? You're losing money, absolutely losing money. So you got to have your money working for you constantly.
Yeah.
But it's going to be a difficult 2023.
Yeah. Well, I know a few people who are on variable rates, and I think their rate's gone up, was like 3% before. Now it's at 6%. So.
Well, yeah. Think about how many people sat there, bought a home on a variable rate mortgage, and they're like, oh man, my property has increased in value in the last 2 years by like a ridiculous amount, which we knew wasn't sustainable. Then they took that money, borrowed against their home, and bought just like ATVs and snowmobiles because they're borrowing money at 2.45%. Now they're paying 6.45%. So that's another 5% on per $100,000 in toys that they bought themselves. Mm-hmm. So, you can go on and on and on. And as I said, the secret, and I was preaching this for the last year and a half. No, not Enriched Academy. We've been preaching this for the last 5, 6, 7 years. Keep your overhead as low as you can. Keep your overhead low. It's a secret. It takes everybody, all the power away from people when it comes to your money. Is if you just keep your overhead low.
Well, so are you have anything coming up with the Edmonton Police that you'll be working with?
Yeah, actually, we have a half-day event coming up with Edmonton Police the end of January, beginning of February. I think it's February 1st or 2nd. Don't hold me to that. I can't remember exactly what it is, but I know everybody's going to get an email. It's going to be a live event. But yeah, 100%. We're going to be doing something with your group. Very excited about that. It's one of the best half-day events you're going to attend. It's funny, entertaining. Like, believe you me, it's really dialed in. The feedback is always spectacular with the groups that we work with. So highly recommend making sure you attend that.
It's here in person, or is it over like WebEx? Or?
No, it's in person. This one's going to be an in-person event. So unfortunately, I won't be at that. I've been, but Jay Seabrook, my business partner, the co-founder of the company, will be there. So he's qualified to talk about all this stuff as I am. And he may not be as good looking, but that's okay. So, but as I said, if you're looking for a good half day, that we know how police officers are. We've been working with you guys for the better part of half a decade, actually more than that. We know that there's a certain level of being guarded, and I understand that, right? And question things as you should. It's your nature, what you guys deal with every day. We have the utmost respect for what police officers go through. You guys are the best of the best. We understand that. Like, it's, sometimes we talk about it at our live events. Sometimes the way the media portrays you is it's completely unfair, not justified. In most cases. As I said, we have the utmost respect for everything that you guys do. And working with your group has been amazing over the last 5 to 7 years. And we understand what makes you guys click. And I can assure you, when it comes to our program, we really, really do just relate to you. And that's the best part of it, is that we worked with all different groups. I mean, walking through a mandatory training session, half the police officers had their arms crossed, just like, what is this?
Yeah.
And within 2 hours, all of them are laughing their asses off, saying, man, you guys get us. And now I have clarity and take a lot of that unnecessary pressure off. So.
Cool. Well, I think we kind of covered everything we were going to get to today. One thing I wanted to make sure was that you got some time to kind of plug your company. And then how can people follow you or Enriched Academy, the work that you're doing out there?
Yeah, you know what? We have an Instagram account, Enriched Academy. We also, that's probably falls on Instagram. That'd be the best way to do it. And that's what you're listening right now. Make sure to attend that event at the end of January, beginning of February. I'm pretty sure it's February 1st or 2nd, though. So make sure you attend that.
Perfect. Well, if you want to hang on the line for just a second, I'll wrap up the recording here.
Sure.
But thank you for coming on today, and we always appreciate
the information.
No problem. Thank you for the opportunity.